Hey folks, Cowboy here, and I'm really excited about this video because it's been really fun to get to know this property. I'm going to talk about Secret Wars, and really what's interesting about this is it's really central to how I think about collecting and investing in comic books, and I like to find some theory or hypothesis about something that may come to pass in the cinema. It could be a rumor, it could be an article I've read, it could be someone blogging about something, and usually these are very early, unsubstantiated rumors that may or may not come to pass. And what's funny about these rumors is that things actually may come to pass, and oftentimes it is simply by coincidence that the rights holders all along were interested in bringing those properties to the screen, and the theories and the folks that wrote about so at an earlier time may have guessed correctly or may have gotten lucky. I happen to think that Secret Wars will be such a property that we will see potentially as early on as Phase 4 of the MCU and in Phase 5, some of these breadcrumbs hinting at this potential conflict in this series way down the line. We are talking about a property and an event that is probably nowhere close to pre-production or development. Nevertheless, if they have any intention of introducing Secret Wars to the cinema one day, you better bet they are going to drop some hints and some breadcrumbs along the way. So when we do get to that point, there have been a few series of footsteps indicating that we may arrive there and building up a little bit of the hype, just like the Avengers films. So what's really great about this approach to collecting and thinking about, in this case, Silver Age is how I'm going to focus on it, because that's where we'll see most of the first appearances, by and large, of a lot of the Marvel characters, with the exception of Cap and potentially the Torch, if you consider the version that showed up in the Golden Age, the first appearance, which was robotic, as opposed to the guy that showed up here in FF1. Most of these heroes showed up in the Silver Age and also the Bronze Age as well. We do see the She-Hulk appearing here, and we see a different version of Captain Marvel that we saw in the film. So super interesting. It's really fun. The first thing I would do, if you're interested in this kind of approach to collecting, which is very early on, is read the material. Read the material first. You will see, as you read if you haven't done so already, or maybe you want a refresher on it, it's a pretty good read. I wouldn't say it's particularly dated, although there is some language and there's some staging of the characters that might feel a little wooden compared to today's standards. In Secret Wars, that makes this a really tremendous read. And for me, it's revisiting material that I enjoyed decades ago. And I'm going to don the glasses here, because what's great about Secret Wars, and when you think about finding the right minor keys and keys that correspond to the characters in here, they spell it out for you. They do it in a somewhat formal manner. In the first issue, here you can see on the page where they all introduce themselves. It's sort of like they should have name tags on. They're all in a room. You've got all the heroes and all the villains. And why this is interesting, this is giving you the lineup, right? This is telling you who's important and who's consequential throughout the Secret Wars series of books. And should this ever arrive in the cinema, certainly it may change and we may see some variation on this material. Essentially, this is your lineup. These are your folks, right? This is your Murderer's Row with the villains, with the heroes. And also by reading the material, you can see who is more important and less important in the hierarchy of storytelling. Who's the main protagonist, who's leading the action. It is, yes, an ensemble of the heroes, much like the Avengers, but some of the heroes are more consequential than others, and some simply have small parts to play, although they're in the cast. And the thing to be mindful of in those exchanges is some of these heroes may drop off as we get pen to paper and the material gets to a screenplay and eventually into development. That said, you will also see as you read the material, and this is great to do. This is fun to do anyway. This is a really fun way to think about collecting, is by reading source material that screenplays and films are based upon, because a lot of it remains true. A lot of the themes carry forward into the Cineplex. So you will notice that Doctor Doom and Magneto are the two main significant villains, and that is likely not to change. And over here on the hero side, well, before we get in there, let me introduce the cast so you know who we're talking about, and then we'll talk about the books. And I've got Amazing Spider-Man 1 here. It's going to sort of lean into the topic here in a minute, and FF1 below me. All right, so I don't know why they introduce themselves. Like it's a little, it feels a little staged because they're introducing themselves not to the reader, but it's actually supposed to be in the flow of the action. So the Beyonder has summoned everyone to this strange alien world where they're supposed to do battle over the next 400 pages here. So you've got most of the Avengers. And this guy, I'm sorry I have to read it to you in this fashion. It's the only way to really kind of get the names across. I'm the Wasp. Okay, the Wasp is there. And with me are the She-Hulk. Okay, She-Hulk shows up. Captain Marvel, Captain America, Thor, Hawkeye, and Iron Man. Okay, I am Professor X, and these are my X-Men. We all know. They all know. But he introduces himself. You've got Storm, Nightcrawler, Rogue. Interesting. Cyclops, Wolverine, and Colossus. Of course, we already saw Colossus in the Deadpool movies. And if you pick up Giant Size X-Men 1, you pick up Colossus, first appearance. You pick up, the new X-Men, which is Nightcrawler and Storm. Rogue's in a different book. And, of course, Wolverine is in Hulk 181. And Lockheed the Dragon, of course, that is Kitty Pryde's little dragon. So I think Kitty Pryde is in this as well. And I like Kitty Pryde. She's fantastic. She was supposed to have her own film. And then the folks at Disney, I believe they canceled that project. Or they're going to drop a lot of this stuff into the Disney Plus arena, which I have no idea how that's going to come to play. They may look at that space as a high-end Arrowverse, like higher production value, bigger name talent, large properties, and less of a TV feel and more of a cinematic approach. Because the Arrowverse, and I enjoy quite a bit of that material, to me feels a little bit at times like a soap opera. Nevertheless, that's your lineup. I am, of course, the Hulk. We'll see the Hulk in Secret Wars. Spider-Man. Spider-Man's really important in Secret Wars. Which is great. And we're the Fantastic Four minus Susie the Invisible Girl. They left her behind. She didn't come along. Where the writing picks up, she's pregnant at that time. That may change. Mr. Fantastic. Right, Reed. And then we cross a few panels. And we get over. That's a good lineup, too. That's a really good lineup. We'll talk about some of those heroes in a little bit of how central they are to this particular drama, because I like to do that. I like to read all the material to understand from a narrative perspective who is really important in this property and who's a minor player, because that is going to potentially, years down the line, influence the prestige and the prominence of those characters, just as it did with the Avengers, when and if this property, this bad boy, ever makes it into the cinema, which is my theory. I really think there's some chance that, and I think it'd be fun too, that Secret Wars does make it to the cinema. And these heroes, in some cases, have never been on the screen before. So that's really exciting. Particularly the villains. Some of them have been, okay. You've got Enchantress. I'm not going to read it from the dialogue bubble. It's ridiculous. Ultron, the Absorbing Man, the Wrecker and his wrecking crew, Thunderball, Pile Driver and Bulldozer. Kang is in this. Galactus, that's awesome. The Lizard, Molecule Man, and Dr. Octopus. So some familiar and some non-familiar from the perspective of the movies. And none other than Doctor Doom, who is really, along with Magneto here, Doctor Doom's the main villain outside of the Beyonder himself, who is orchestrating all the action here. I think there were quite a few rumors and articles about our friend Doctor Doom showing up in the cinema sometime potentially soon, or at least in the next Fantastic Four movie. So that FF5 book has accelerated in price. I do not think, though, it has increased in value due to any rumor about Secret Wars, because I've just seen very little out there about people discussing Secret Wars as a potential property that's going to bind together all the material that comes through in the different phases of the MCU. Although I think something like this does make a lot of sense. If I was a development executive at the studio at Disney, I would absolutely greenlight the shit out of this property because it has so much potential to bring everybody together again in something that is battle tested, as something that really resonated in the market at the time, in a way that was considerably more than the story that we got via Endgame and Thanos and all that material. I think Secret Wars, if you make it a little bit more contemporary, some of it in some respects it is a little bit simplistic. There's no problem with today's writers. They can do something a little bit more that is a wonderful property that brings together a lot of heroes. And this is just a fun way to collect. By reading these original comics, and you could do it with some of the other films that are purported to come out as well. They really do lean on this literature and this material down the line. So what I'm not going to do, because I don't have time for it, is walk you through each of those first appearances of the heroes that were mentioned here in the book, and also the villain. I think you could do that yourself if you're curious, or better yet, pick up the graphic novel, read it, and see what strikes you, and see what characters you like, and go out and get those books. Because if you get those titles, those minor keys, I don't mean the first appearance of the FF, or the first appearance of Doctor Doom, I mean some of these other more minor characters. I mean, the Wasp is well known, but she hasn't been that prominent outside of the Ant-Man material. So this would be particularly interesting as a standalone character here in this material. And going back to Spider-Man, we really don't need any more validation of the significance of Spider-Man to give the books any more of an uptick. Although, that being said, Spider-Man is very central to Secret Wars. No doubt about it. The black costume, there's a lot of things that happen with Spider-Man as we progress through the narrative that are interesting and influenced the whole line for quite a few issues, for quite a number of years. And so Spider-Man, and a book that I like quite a bit because it's less expensive than Amazing Fantasy 15, and it took me a while to warm to this cover, and I really like it quite a bit now. Amazing Spider-Man 1 here in 5.0 condition, and this really fantastic Ditko cover, where you see also the Fantastic Four here. And speaking of which, in the Secret Wars lore, as I mentioned, Doctor Doom is a really significant character. I am, for that reason, although the book has really accelerated over the last 6 to 8 months, I'm still interested in that book. I still think it's a good time to participate in it. Doctor Doom has not yet, in a meaningful way and a tasteful way, graced the screen. And when he does, he is a figure along the lines of a Darth Vader. He's that central and that important to the Fantastic Four, and he deserves a really interesting treatment, which may come in the upcoming, whenever it's to be released, I think it's in some form of early development Fantastic Four film, and potentially in the Secret Wars. So he is a pain in the ass, and he's a gnat that needs to be squashed in the Secret Wars, but he's really driving the action. You know, the Beyonder sets the stage, so to speak, and the rules of engagement, and he's a little bit along the periphery initially, and it's Doom, and opposite Doom, Magneto is also a significant character. So here at Fantastic Four, these folks are also really central to Secret Wars, and so is Cap. You know, when you, again, as you read the material, you start to see who is driving the action and who is a leader, because when you have an ensemble piece like this, there are still going to be certain heroes that are your more main protagonists. They may have several, just as in some respects Iron Man was in the Avengers films. You will see that Reed from the Fantastic Four, and Cap is really the de facto leader of the heroes. And the rest form the ensemble here, with Spidey as a key figure, and then opposite on the villain side, you've got Doom and all those other great heroes that are spread across a bunch of titles like Journey into Mystery, Silver Surfer, Fantastic Four's got a lot of first appearances. So that's it. I would just really encourage you, if you're interested in investing and collecting in this fashion, which is find a rumor, as I did, or some thesis that has a thread of credibility to it, and just pull on it and give yourself time to become very familiar with the material, and it may really pay dividends for you down the line. I could do a similar video with the Submariner. The Submariner may show up as a villain in the Black Panther film that's coming up. He may not, but there's been some indication that he may arrive, and there's a little bit of a constellation of villains and also related heroes to the Submariner. And now's a fun time to read some of those books to give you some perspective on who to collect. And this is a way to do things quietly, at your own pace, leisurely, and to give it some overall context to what you're collecting. When you read the books and the material, it's simply more enriching than just going to Comic Link or Heritage and picking up a Hulk 181 or a Jim 83 or whatever it is that you're interested in buying. Those are great to pick up, but this gives you a little bit more context, right, and a little bit more strategy, because you're balancing the weight of the characters in this particular literature. And if the bet comes to pass, you're going to be really well positioned of having bought those books as they are sort of in the hierarchy of the narrative, which is great, that's a tremendous play. And even as Secret Wars never comes to the movies, you will still be pretty excited that you picked up some great books. Not all of them are cheap now, but they got some room to grow. Last but not least, if you can, and you like the video, like it, leave a comment, and subscribe. Thanks a lot.